Okay, if you really want to see an effective lesson, I guess you got to have students in the room. But here's an approximation of this one. Oftentimes when I'm trying to teach the concept of symbols, I'll ask a student in the classroom who has a tattoo. And you'll end up with a student who, if you're the kind of person who gets a tattoo, you're the kind of person who wants to show off that tattoo. And what you do is, when the first person raises their hands because they're super excited to have that barbed wire around their arm, we'll say, hey, what does that barbed wire represent? And there's always some sort of justification where they say, oh, you know, my grandpa, you know, he passed away 2 years ago or something like that, and I really miss him, and somehow this barbed wire represents him. And you're like, okay. And so you can kind of see that this thing, this barbed wire, that does not in any way represent that person's grandfather, to them it does. And that shows you what a symbol means. I'll often put a couple of symbols on the board. Say, hey, who remembers this guy from when they were kids? And they'll say, oh, that's Mr. Yuck. He's, and we're like, well, what does he mean? And they'll say, it means don't drink that. It's full of poison that will kill you if you're an infant. You're like, yeah, very good. And you kind of run through a couple of things. What does this mean? Hey, it's hippies. All right, cool. And then they go through all the things this means. They'll say, oh, peace. They'll say, oh, Vietnam protest. They'll say a couple other things. Occasionally you'll say, oh, this means poison. Then someone will say, wait a minute. This means pirates. And you're like, oh, okay, so it can mean a couple of things. And then eventually you get to this thing after a couple of, you know, the subtraction sign and the division sign. So this and say, what does this mean? And they're like, I mean, this is plus sign. And I'm like, really? It means that? And someone will say, well, it could mean intersection. And you're like, oh, that's great. How about if we just change it a little bit here? What does this mean? And they're like, oh, it means Christianity. It means Jesus. It means all of these things. So basically, it builds you to the idea of symbols by having them interact with these ideas, and shows the fluidity of these ideas. It really helps nail down a couple of concepts about symbols, because symbols at the end of the day are arbitrary things that we take to mean something. So this is a way to show them the meaning of symbols when they're really generating it and showing it to you, and you're just basically pointing them in the right direction. It's a good system, and that's what good teaching, I think, should do. Typically after you show them the idea, I create the context, we create meaning, and then I have them create symbols to show that they understand what it means. If you're ever having a hard time with a lesson, you just structure it as, I do this, then we do this, and then they do this. So if you go from I, we, to them being the students, you got a good chance of getting your concept across. And yeah, those are symbols.